Hey, I'm Dr. Hannah Hamlin. I am a diabetes educator and a person living with type 1 diabetes. And I want to start today by talking about my story. I think we all have this kind of diagnosis story that stays pretty clear in our minds when there's a lot of emotion surrounding an event. Our memory is more likely to kind of latch onto those details and keep them long term. And so I want to share my story, not just from the perspective of this is what happened, these were the events, these were the numbers, but really the emotions behind my diagnosis. Because I want you to know, if you haven't met someone with diabetes or haven't talked to someone about what it felt to be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the emotional processing, I think, can be pretty similar for a lot of people, or at least have overlapping highlights that may help you to feel less alone. So I was 13 years old, just kind of started middle school in a new country. We actually grew up overseas for my dad's job. I was living in Scotland for 10 years. We lived in Norway for a year. And then right in the middle of middle school, we moved to Houston, Texas. And I started what felt like a massive junior high there. There were hundreds of people. I don't think I had ever seen that many people my age. And 6 months into classes, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I got really lucky. My mom noticed I had frequent urination and took me to a primary care doctor because she thought I had a urinary tract infection. And they were able to find ketones in my urine and send me to a endocrinologist that day. So I have never actually been hospitalized with diabetes. I can't speak to what that feels like. But I remember the drive from the primary care doctor to the endocrinologist. It was like 4:30. We were stuck in Houston traffic. I had absolutely no idea what was happening. But my mom, I could tell she was terrified. And I think she knew at that point that what it likely was and that it would be a lifelong kind of diagnosis for me. So I just remember being really scared because she was so scared. And then we got to the endocrinologist and it was, close to closing. They took us in on an urgent appointment. And I remember sitting with a nurse in the appointment room. And it's funny, these memories are so clear. I can even remember kind of where the table was, what it looked like. She was talking me through needing to take a dose of Lantus, talking me through needing to take a short-acting insulin injection to correct. My blood sugar was about 500. I certainly had ketones, but I was not in ketoacidosis, so they were able to take care of it outpatient. And she was just pretty insistent that first injection I had to do on my own. She wasn't gonna let me leave until I gave myself the injection in my stomach. And I think we sat there for like 20 minutes and I was just like terrified and not understanding why I needed to do it, not understanding at all what diabetes meant for the rest of my life. And that was a really kind of hard moment, waiting to do that or trying to talk myself into doing that. But that wasn't the hardest part at all. And I think often when we tell people about type 1 diabetes, people see the physical actions and see the challenge there. They're like, wow, I could never imagine giving myself shots that often. But in my opinion, that's not the hard part at all. The hard part is my relationship with my own health and figuring out how to stay healthy and feel healthy and navigate different situations and all the variables that lifestyle brings to blood sugar levels. That's the hard part to me, not the shots. But I kind of got through that. They sent us home. They gave us some diabetes education, which was a CD. That'll probably age myself. But the CD, we got home, we put it in, and we went to listen to it, and it was in Spanish. I guess they had grabbed the wrong copy. So that was pretty funny that night. My mom's took some Spanish classes and lived abroad, so she had a little bit of a Spanish background, but she's sitting there with a dictionary. We're trying to convert it. I had to take my dinner shot once we got home, and I just remember sitting in the dining room for like 45 minutes, and my dad was there with me trying to help me figure out how to do this injection. And again, I don't really remember understanding why. I knew it was important to do that. And then I remember the next day, I just went to school like nothing had happened. The next day I had to go to the nurse's station. My parents dropped me off, kind of explained what was going on. My mom didn't know what I could eat. We had so many questions about food. That's actually probably what inspired my bachelor's degree in nutritional sciences, was just really wanting to find answers and what we have studied so far, what we know. So she brought me a Chick-fil-A wrap because we thought, oh, a wrap is healthier. It's not fried. We really didn't know what we were doing. And it totally spiked my blood sugar super high. We also didn't know how to count carbs. It was just, kind of shooting in the dark at that point with insulin, literally. So we did our best. It worked out really well. The school nurse at this middle school happened to be our neighbor, and so that gave me a lot of comfort, at least having a familiar face. And I didn't really get it for a long time. And kind of came a point, a couple days, weeks later, my parents were like, okay, we need to notify all your teachers. We need to send them a letter so that they understand you can leave class if your blood sugar goes low, or if you're not feeling well, to go to the nurse. And I was not about telling people what was going on. I felt so different already because I had moved from another country 6 months prior. I already felt like I was having trouble making friends and had different social norms and cultural norms, and I even had a different accent at the time, and it was just hard to feel like I had somebody to sit next to at lunch. I wasn't ready to tell them, and that I had all these health problems too. And so I really remember struggling to give my teachers those letters. My mom put them in my backpack. I was the one that had to kind of hand them out, and I just remember I may have not done it for a little while. I was so not ready for people to understand more about me. And I think a lot of that not being ready part, or being afraid of telling other people about type 1 diabetes, came from me not getting it, me not quite understanding. I think there was so much unknown that I felt like I would be judged for things I didn't know about. And it probably didn't help that in Scotland, it was in a tiny school, there was one guy in our class, he had type 1 diabetes and he also had Down syndrome. And so I didn't yet in my head understand how to differentiate those two. I was 13, it just seemed like, oh, that's kind of comes with everything. And so that was really hard. I felt like people were gonna treat me differently. They were gonna think I was different. They were gonna think I was less capable of doing things. And so I just didn't talk about it with friends for months and months and months. I barely talked about it with my teachers. And it was that summer that my parents were like, okay, we got to do something different here. They sent me to Texas Lions Camp, which is a free camp in Texas for children with type 1 diabetes. It's a week long. And that was really the first time that I remember, at least, getting to know multiple people or multiple other kids with type 1 diabetes. And really living amongst them for a week made a massive difference in what I knew about diabetes, what I thought diabetes to mean. I met a lot of adults with type 1 diabetes there. Dr. Stephen Ponder, who ran the camp, still runs the camp, he had type 1 diabetes, and he would talk to us about what life as an adult with type 1 diabetes looked like, and what we were capable of, and that we really could do most things, almost everything that we wanted to with type 1 if we could just figure out how to make the blood sugar piece work. And it was really, really transformational. I think I left that camp a different person. And my parents would absolutely say the same thing. I remember we had these kind of diabetes shirts, that said diabetes on them. And my parents picked me up, we went to eat out, and I wore the shirt in the restaurant, and my mom was just astonished that I was not afraid to show other people that I had some relation or that I had type 1 diabetes. And I think that was really, really cool. And my parents tell me how much I shifted after that experience. I don't know if I remember as much, the before and after, but I became a lot more confident with talking about it. I would say that probably not immediately, certainly not immediately, did I have a relationship where I felt okay with it. I think that when we have a big diagnosis that is lifelong, or that is life transformational, really shifting our quality of life, it is so normal to go through the stages of grief. And I probably did that with my teenage hormones, on top of things, but I don't think that people realize how much the mental shift, the mental processing of a big diagnosis takes. And so often I think we kind of brush it under the rug a little bit, or we try to be strong through it. We don't know what to expect, to come from it. And what's really interesting is I know that to be so true for what I experienced with my diagnosis, what other people with type 1 diabetes that I've met also experienced. But I see it today in the clinic. I see it with people who get diagnoses of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, an autoimmune thyroid condition. I see it in people who get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I see it with other diagnoses as well that are kind of life shifting, and it is kind of this process that takes time to make peace with it, or to learn to make peace with it. And truthfully, not everybody does learn to make peace with it, but I feel so strongly that that is when my life shifted back to a positive, healthy, happy quality of life, was from the moment I was diagnosed until I made peace with and got to a place where I learned to at least be able to appreciate diabetes in my life to some extent. I learned that it wasn't the end of the world. I learned and decided that I could have a happy, healthy life with it. And I really decided in my heart that I was not broken. I really had to convince myself that I was okay as I was. There was nothing wrong with me. I shouldn't be any different than I am. I'm different than other people. My metabolism works differently than other people now, but I am not broken. You know, I'm whole exactly as I am with type 1 diabetes. And that was when I decided that, and I truly believed it, that is when I started to have that happy, healthy quality of life. And it took me a long time. It probably took me until my early to mid 20s, so maybe plus or minus 10 years to kind of figure that out. And it doesn't at all, do I believe, from psychology courses or from seeing lots of examples of people, it doesn't all need to take 10 years to get there. It just takes finding the right questions to ask yourself, being curious, being in a place where you feel stable and curious to even say, am I willing to change my relationship with this? Is there a way I could see it better? Or even to the point where you're understanding and accepting and letting yourself look at the fact that maybe you don't have the best relationship with it. Maybe there's something there, there's words coming up in your head every time your blood sugar's high or low that you're telling yourself that make you feel less than, right? That make you feel bad, or make you feel like something's wrong, or that it shouldn't be the way that it is. And until you're really ready to look at and acknowledge that those thoughts are there, it's hard to shift it. So it takes getting to that point. You know, I think it takes getting to a place where we're ready. And there's no right or wrong time to be ready. I think we all in life, outside of diabetes, learn different lessons in different orders. And that's, I frankly think, the way it should be, because that's the way it is. But really, you know, so don't judge where you are, or don't judge kind of if you're at a place where you have a good relationship with it or not, or if you had diabetes for a long time and you haven't started to look at your relationship with it, you probably haven't had support in that area, right? It's not something that's out there for most people. I think I got incredibly lucky that I was sent to a summer camp that had a lot of supportive people that poured their heart into that place, that told their own story, that really made a point to describe these things. But without that camp, I don't know where I'd be at all. I really don't. I don't know if I would have made it through college. I certainly don't think I would have made it to med school. A lot of the inspiration, empowerment, skills that I learned came from volunteering at that camp through college. And that was really the impetus for me applying to med school. So I'm so grateful for a lot of how my life has unfolded with diabetes now, but there was a time where I really hated it, and I really hated who I was because I had it. And I'm just here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way if you don't want it to be. So I hope this story helped you. I would love to hear if you have a story or the emotions around a story, and you would like to share them, please comment below. And if you really want to, I think it would be cool to do a series of interviews on other people's stories and the emotions around diagnosis. And ideally, if you have had kind of come along that journey, maybe you're not to a place where you have peace with it, you're along the way, or maybe you're at a place where you do now have peace with it, but it was recent and you remember the steps that it took to get there. You remember that having to accept that you were going to be different. Those pieces. So wherever you are on that journey, if you're just getting started, you haven't started, you're making progress as you go through life right now, let me know in the comments and maybe we can set up an interview. I don't know how many I'll have time to do, but I think it would be really fun to get some other stories on here. So thanks for listening. And as always, give me any questions below if you have any curiosities or things that you haven't been able to find answers to yet. And if I know them or know where to send you to get them, I will do my best. Thanks so much. Bye.